Hi, my name is Chris Sinutko. I work with SPX. I'm here today to go over the disassembly and assembly and maintenance procedures of the W75CP double seat mixed proof valve used for PMO applications like you have here at the craft facility. This valve is specifically designed to meet the PMO pasteurized milk ordinance. So there are some unique features to it beyond the standard food and beverage mixed proof valves. But I'll go over the maintenance procedures and how to take it out of the line and work on the valve. So let's get started. First steps in removing this valve from the line, you want to make sure that the pumps around the valve manifold are all locked out, tagged out. Nothing is going through the upper body or through the lower body on this valve. As an added step to it, to relieve any pressure that could be built up in the upper line or the lower line, it's a good idea to do an upper seat lift and to do a lower seat lift. Our three connections here, we have our middle connection is to open the valve. The bottom connection is to do an upper seat lift, so that's moving just the upper seats to do a seat clean when you're cleaning that upper line. And then the lower seat air connection moves just the lower seats, and again during the seat cleaning of that lower line. But adding air to do an upper seat lift, again lifts up just that upper seats, and then when you're removing it from the line, you would have drainage. If there is any contents in that upper line, drainage would all come out and drain out the bottom of the valve and relieving any pressure that could be built up in the upper line. Doing a lower seat clean, add air to the top air connection, pushes that lower seat downward. Again, any contents that would be in the lower line, any pressure that would be built up would be all exhausted through the bottom of the valve, through that vent drain. So that's just as a caution, another caution step. Then you would want to, in order to take off this top clamp, you need to add air to the valve. All the mixed proof valves are normally closed, so when there's no air on it, the spring inside the actuator is pushing these valves closed, or the seats closed. So to relieve the pressure that's on the line, you would add air to open the valve completely. And you could do that by manually adding air like I'm doing now, or you could do that on the control panel touch screen. But you need to next open the valve completely. And you can see the stems are lifted up, the seats are lifted up, and relieving the pressure that's on this top clamp. If you do feel some resistance on this wing nut, then you want to stop. Because there could be some pressure built up in the line, or maybe the valve hasn't opened up completely. You can see that it's easily removed. After you remove that, you want to immediately exhaust the air and close the valve, because you don't want to be working on a valve that has active air on it. Exhaust the valve, and then that actually helps lift the valve inserts out of the body. So we're all finished with our air. Now we can remove the valve insert, which is everything less the body, directly out of the body, out of the line, and take it back to work on it. So typically the body would be welded in place, so you lift the valve directly up out of the body. Try to do it as straight as possible so you don't damage your stem. And you can put that onto the work harder bench. So then you have your body that typically, again, welded in place. You want to remove this lower clamp, which has some added seals to it as well. Body O-ring and a couple bearings, shaft seals. And a good way to take that out in line is to take the bottom of your hammer and gently knock it out. Try to catch it if you can, put a hand underneath it so it makes a lot of noise. But again, that body's going to stay in line, and this is going to be everything that you take back and do your maintenance on. So the next step in disassembly of this is to remove this lower stem, and I'm going to lift this valve on this control top just so you can get a better view of it. Typically you would want to either work on it on the side like this, but just to get a better view I'm going to work on it upside down. So it's a 9/16 wrench. Remove your lower stem, take your hammer, give it a whack to loosen the threads on it. There's some fine threads. So this lower stem actually has an inner stem that screws into one piston inside this actuator. You can see it's all hollowed out on the inside. This is your leak detect path, or path where your CIP solution drains when you do an upper C clean or do a lower C clean. Then next you want to remove the upper stem. That just unscrews as well. If you see that this collar in the yoke area is rotating, you want to hold that so that it doesn't rotate, otherwise you won't be doing any unscrewing. But again, there's a lot of fine threads on these stems to keep them from unscrewing when they're in operation. This upper stem is actually hollowed out on the inside, and it's screwed into a different piston inside the actuator, and that's what allows your independent seat movement when you do the seat clean. So you can independently move either the upper seats or the lower seats while you have product running in the opposite body. So you can see the upper stem is hollowed out. So again, this is how it's placed in the valve. Your inner stem or lower stem is screwed into one piston. Your outer stem is screwed into a different piston inside this actuator. And depending on what port you put air to, you'll have the different movements. An upper seat clean, lower seat clean, or when the valve fully opens, this lower stem will move up, hit the upper stem, and they'll both raise up together. So that's disassembly procedures of the product zone parts. So this is what we're going to do our maintenance on. We can put our actuator over to the side. To continue disassembling our upper stem, we remove these two O-rings. This stop ring that's on the upper stem. This stop ring actually hits against the collar here, and that's what sets the lower seat clean movement. It's a hard stop, so when we screw this upper stem back in, see that it sits on the edge of the stem right there, and we turn it in until it's a hard stop, screw it all the way into the actuator until that stop ring is snug with the collar. So that's what this is used for, to set your seat clean movements. And then this is the targets, metal target and wavy spring. This target is used to signal the lower proximity switch, or excuse me, the yoke proximity switch that's used along with the two proximity switches in the control top to give you indication of all the different operations, different positions of the valve. The closed position, the open position, the lower seat clean position, and the upper seat clean position. So you get 4 distinct feedback signals with your 3 proximity switches. Again, 2 in the control top and 1 in the yoke area. But the yoke proximity switch monitors the upper stem. So as the upper stem lifts up, this target will lift up and will make contact with that yoke prox. and signal that yoke prox, and it'll turn off. So that yoke proximity switch will turn off when it signals or when it touches this metal target. And then when it goes back down, when the upper stem goes back down, the yoke prox will turn back on and light up. Then we have the upper adapter or upper bonnets that has your body O-ring seal. And then it's actually two pieces. It's two pieces because it has this wiping stem seal that seals along that shaft. See here, to fit this wiping stem seal inside, we need to make it two pieces to get inside there easily. And then we also have a Teflon bearing, split bearing on the inside that helps guide that upper shaft. So the seal can be removed easily by hand. The Teflon bearing, typically I try to get it started with a pick and then get behind it and then take my needle nose pliers and rip the rest of it out. And then once these are removed, you don't want to reuse these. Get a new one and replace it. The other, let's continuing with the upper stem. The other seals, the seat seals, are going to be your highest wear items on these valves. You have your upper tri-ring seal, and you have, this is the spray blocker that deflects the CIP spray when you're doing an upper C clean or a lower C clean. It deflects the CIP spray down the drain and out the bottom of the valve. And then you have your lower radial seal O-ring as well. So these three seals are going to be your high wear parts in your seat area. So to change out, first the spray blocker seal. This is a regular round O-ring, but it just sits around the groove of the spray blocker, and it's pretty easy to take on and off by hand. Get behind the groove. Again, it's just a round O-ring. Now the tri-ring seal is actually a custom molded seal. And to remove that, it's fitted into the groove pretty well. And again, take our pick and holding it with the shaft here, I stab the tri-ring seal and I bend back on the elastomer. Don't want to bend back on either side of the metal stem. Want to bend back on the elastomer so that I don't nick up the metal groove. And bend back on it, get it started, pull it out a little bit like that, and then I can continue doing that with my pick, or I can take my needle nose and cut the seal. And rip the rest of it out. Now, cutting that seal does two things. Obviously, it helps you remove the seal out of the groove, but it also tells you that this seal is no good, so that when you do put it to the side, you don't reuse it by accident. So put that off to the side. And now we have our bare upper shaft ready to be replaced with the seals. So when you're ready to replace the seals, and your grooves are all cleaned out, if there's any residue from the material or other residue around there, you want to clean that out and brush that off. If you did make any nicks or you see any nicks on it, you can take some very fine sandpaper or some emery cloth and lightly sand it down, sand down the high edges on it, but you don't want to sand it down too much. So after that's all completed and cleaned off, we're ready to put on our upper seat seals. So the upper stem, like I said, the upper seat is a angled side to it, and then there's a flat side to it as well. Now when you put the seal on with the shaft in this orientation, the shaft upward, you want the angled side to always be upward. So a good way to do that is to put the valve stem into a vise with some copper jaws like I have here, or if you have a box or a crate with a hole in it, stick that in there. It's in there. That way you have both hands available to work on the valve. Now with the tri-ring, the EPDM, one thing I didn't say, the different seals on the seat area have different colored dots on it. A green dot indicates EPDM material, and a white dot indicates FKM material, or Viton material. So that's a good indication if you don't know which type of seal you're putting into the valve. But EPM materials, what I have here, is a little bit easier to get into the groove. So you typically don't need too much lubrication or anything more to get this tri-ring inside of there. For the FKM material, you would want to put this in some soapy water to get some lubricity around it. Don't want to use too much lube because you don't want it to cake in behind the seal. You would want to use some soapy water around the seal. So I'm going to get it started. Again, your angled side is up. Get it started so it's just sitting around the outside edge, so that the edge on the inside of that tri-ring seal is all the way around. There is a dovetail groove around the outside. I want to make sure I didn't twist that seal up at all when I was putting it on. So this is our starting position for installing a tri-ring. And then we want to take either a dull putty knife, just nothing sharp, but this is the tool that we use in our assembly. In our factory, all these are put in by hand, and we use this tri-ring tool. And what we're going to do is take the top edge of this tri-ring tool, and we're going to put it and press the bottom edge of the tri-ring seal, and we're going to push it in and try to tuck that leading edge into the groove under and up so that it fits inside of it. You can see there, press it on one side, do some wrist action back and forth, rock it in there, and you can see that it's obviously that it's in. Then we want to go 180 degrees opposite of that. Again, do some wrist action to get the opposite end in. And then we want to put in each quadrant one by one. We don't want to go in a continuous loop and work our way around, because otherwise we're going to end up with a big excess loop at the end. This is tough for beginners, but it just takes a little bit of practice. Once you do it a few times, you get the hang of it. We want to make sure that there's no bubbles or air pockets all the way around, that everything looks smooth. You can use the different edges of the tool to get some of the smaller bubbles out. You can even use your thumb and fingers to press out different air pockets. So that's installing the upper stem, the upper tri-ring seal. So we can remove it from our vise. Then installing the spray blocker. Again, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Just put it in by hand. It just presses on by hand. So there we have our upper shaft seals are replaced. Now taking a look at the lower stem. Lower stem, we have this inner O-ring that's again removed by an O-ring tool and presses on, rolls on by hand. The more difficult seat seal is this radial seal O-ring. It's on the lower stem. Again, we want to take our pick. It's pressed into that groove very tightly. So we want to take our pick and stab at it and press again backwards on the seal. We don't want to press or angle on the metal. We want to angle on the backward on the seal and lift upward. And then once we get that started, we can again pull it out a little bit with our pick, or if we have some pliers, we can cut it and then rip out the rest and dispose of these. So here's a bare shaft again, cleaning out any residue from the product or from the seal material could have got behind there. And again, if you see any high edges or rough spots, lightly sanding that down. So then we take our new radial seal. We do want to lube this up, and it's perfectly okay to use lubrication on this seal. We want to lube it up just so it looks wet, so it's got a nice shine to it. Should be enough. And then stick it over the top and press it around the groove so that's just sitting on the edge evenly. Then, rather than trying to press that seal in, you can see it's a pretty large cross-section O-ring. Rather than trying to press that in by hand or roll it in by on a table or a flat surface that may not get it in evenly and maybe pretty time-consuming and pretty difficult to get in. We've designed this radial seal installation collar, and the collar sits above and below the radial seal. You can see there's some gradual edges on the inside, so that as we line up the holes and compress this down, it extrudes that O-ring into the groove evenly. So we have our bottom section, and we want to make sure that the angles are aligned on the inside, and then the top section, which has this shoulder onto it, which sits on the shoulder of the lower stem, so they cannot go on backwards. You cannot flip those around. And then we take our bolts, line up the holes, and screw those in all the way around. And we take our 7/16 wrench, and that's not it. 7/16 wrench, and tighten these down one by one. Do a couple turns at a time on one, then do 180 degrees opposite, do a couple turns on the other one, then again all four quadrants, do a couple turns all the way around so that we're evenly tightening down and pressing that radial seal O-ring into the groove. You want to hold the lower shaft by the balancer here, not by the stem, because you don't want to bend that stem, damage it. We want to go all the way down until it's metal to metal, so there is no gap between these two collars. Sometimes you can feel the O-ring pop in. It's easier to turn. Tighten down all the bolts. Speed metal to metal, and now let's untighten them. make sure that it looks evenly put in, which it does, and that's it. That's installing the lower radial seal O-ring. So now if we take a look at our different shaft seals, and you have your wiping stem seal for your upper shaft that just presses into the bottom part of that bonnet. And you put your Teflon bearing, your new one, wrap it around your finger to coil it up, bend it a little bit, and then stick it inside of the groove, and then let it uncoil and spring back into the groove. You do want to press it on, you can press it on, make sure that it's all the way in, but it should snap into that groove. So you have your top part, bottom part, those are pressed together. Then you have your body O-ring, goes around the outside, this goes against the body. So we can start putting this upper shaft back together. Spring, don't want to forget that, and our metal target, then our stop ring, and then our two O-rings. We try to use as many standard size O-rings as possible on these valves. Even in the part number, in the parts lists, we have for example, part number is V70210. V would indicate the material Viton, or FKM. 70 is the durometer, and 210 is the cross-section size for that standard size O-ring. That's our upper shaft assembly. And then, if you remember, this was on the bottom side of the body. This contains the shaft seal for the lower stem, and some bearings as well, 2 bearings. These can be easily taken out with a O-ring tool or pick. But this is a similar wiping stem seal as we had on the upper adapter with that L shape to it. And we have our body O-ring. And then we have two of these bearings, split bearings, that are a little bit larger in diameter. But if you get your pick, get it started. Get it started with that, and then pull it out, the rest of it out with your needle nose pliers. And then the other one is the exact same way. I'm going to reassemble it, take your new wiping stem seal, and just press it back into the groove so it fits all the way in. And your body O-ring presses back on. And your new split bearing, again, you want to coil it up, especially coil the edges up all the way around, so that they're circular, and then try to place it into the groove and let it expand out. Now, it doesn't matter where the split is in the bearings, but I usually try to do them on opposite ends, but again, it doesn't really matter. And then just to make sure we got everything in place, you want to put it back on the lower stem and move it up and down a couple times, so that we know we got the bearing in, and the seals are all the way into that groove. So next, once we're done with this lower adapter, lower seal retainer, we want to put it back into the body, onto the underside of the body. And typically the body would be welded in place. However, if it was clamped in place and you had the body removed for some reason and didn't know which orientation was up, in which orientation was down, we do etch into the necks of each one of these bodies and up, and that's on both sides in the bore area. So that tells you your orientation of your body. We want to press these into the bottom of the body first, otherwise it'd be very difficult to get it back into it. And take our clamp. Next, we want to put together, reassemble our valve back into the actuator. So take our actuator. We want to reinsert the upper stem. When we put these back together, we want to put some never sees back onto all the threaded parts. So we use food grade never sees, even though this isn't in the product zone. We still use the never sees that is food grade just in case. And we use the Bostic never sees, which has a white PTFE. We'll screw our upper stem back into the valve. Starts to move, you want to try to hold it in place. So with the Allen key. You can see we want to screw this down until the stop ring there is completely snug. Right now, we'll move it a little bit. There's some play in it. You want to keep on going until that stop ring cannot move until it's a hard stop. Stop, everything's moving together now. And with the lower shaft, again, we want to put never sees onto the threads, get around. Very carefully. Put that shaft in. Threads into the actuator. And once it's hand tight, you want to take your 9/16 wrench again and your hammer and give it one last whack to lock those threads in place. And it just takes one whack to do that. So now we're ready to put this valve back in the body. We do want to lubricate all the O-rings, seat seals, body O-ring seals, just to make it easier to get back into the body. Even the shaft, I'm going to add some lubrication. So now we're ready to put it back into the body. So we take it back to the valve manifold, back to the line. And once we want to remove it, and as straight as possible again, slide that insert back into the body Try not to damage any of the seals, any of the body seals. And you're going to go in almost all the way, but again, you're going to see that the seats are hitting against the body, so you're going to need to add air to put the top clamp back on and to have the body drop the rest of the way. So we add air into this middle port, raise up all the stems. Body drops in all the way. And then we want to make sure that the orientation of the valve insert and the valve body is correct, that all of our air connections will line up, that our power connections will line up, and then we want to put our clamp back on. Then remove the air, and I like to go through the different operations of the valve, doing an upper seat lift, just to make sure that everything looks to be working okay. Do a lower seat clean. Full open of the valve as well. Then we want to match up the air lines that are coming from the control top to the side of the valve. And on the control top, etched in the base, there's 1, 2, and 3, which stand for the first, second, and third solenoid. And this is always the case for the mixed-proof valves. The first air connections, number 1, goes to the main stroke to open the valve, so that's the middle connection. The second air connections, number 2, goes to the upper seat clean, which is the lowermost elbow. And then the third, number 3 solenoid, does the lower seat clean. And you can also tell these hose are cut to a certain length as well, so you can also tell by that. One last step to ensure that you've done and reassembled this completely. Each one of these valves comes with a gauge. This gauge has 2 purposes. One, you can see that there's different notches for the different sizes of the valve. We have here a 2-inch valve. If we put this on the bottom retainer, we want the notch for the 2-inch valve to line up with the top edge on that balancer. We can see that it does do that. So we know that we've reassembled this valve correctly, that's back in the full closed position, that we're good to go that way. Second purpose of this gauge is to set our yoke proximity switch. Now to set the yoke switch, this gap, or the gap that's set, is the width of this gauge. So we did need to reset that yoke switch. We would loosen the 7/16 bolts that we have, and then put our gauge. I typically use 2 gauges on either side of the brackets, and gently press down. Don't want to press down too hard, because you don't want to compress that wavy spring, but use 2 gauges so that the bracket is even, and tighten down. And that sets the gap for your yoke proximity switch. And then you would want to power up your valve, connect your power and your main air connection, and you're good to go. So that's all I have. That's how to disassemble, reassemble, do some maintenance procedures of the W75CP double seat mixed proof valve for PMO applications. Thank you.